All right, let's do this again. So, hi, I'm Luke, and once again, welcome to After the Final Set, a place where I share my reflections after a workout. As you guys already know, I get pretty reflective after a workout, and yeah, I hope that some of these thoughts post-workout can help you guys, especially because I feel like training releases me from my day-to-day challenges. It helps me to have a break, and of course after a break you tend to think about new things, or you tend to think about old challenges in new ways. So what I want to talk about today, that's rather simple. Training requires sometimes to switch your brain off and to follow. As I've said countless times, under normal circumstances I have a personal trainer. This means that in a session with my personal trainer, Steve from Optimizer Sport, who you may have heard me already refer to before in the past or in my previous videos if we've watched them already. Steve is a professional at what he does. And no matter how much is on my head, the minute I start training with him, I have to switch my head off. And in fact, the more effectively that I switch my head off and the more effectively I can start following his instructions, the more effective my workouts are. Now, sometimes if I'm training by myself, so without Steve, as I am now, whilst on vacation in Australia, I find that I need to be able to switch my head on. I need to be in the workout, really thinking about my body and what I need to do in the session. And that's because Steve's not here. And it doesn't help if I'm just going through the motions, because if I'm just going through the motions and I don't have somebody like Steve or a personal trainer to observe me and to direct me, I might end up finishing the session and finishing it at only say 80% of my full potential. This leads me to a thought. In life, we need to know when to lead and we need to know when to follow. There are circumstances where leading leads to a more effective result, and there's also circumstances where following leads to a more effective result. Just a simple example. Think about the last time you've caught up in a very big group. Now, you may have found yourself in a circumstance where you had a lot of active speakers, and then you have this one person who may be in the group. I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but I have, who no matter what point of the conversation, no matter what topic, this particular person cuts off other people in the group and has to share their experience, essentially monopolizing that conversation. Now, this tends to frustrate a group very, very quickly. And I always wondered why this happens. And I have to be honest, I've actually done it from time to time. I think we all have done it from time to time. I feel like the urge to be a contributor, the urge to lead, is sometimes misguided. I can't tell you precisely why people do it. However, I can tell you sometimes I take over a conversation. I'm that annoying person in that group because I sometimes feel anxiety to make sure that the conversation is driven, but at the same time, the more I engage with the conversation, sometimes just the easier it is for me to relate to the conversation. But there's a beauty in standing back. There's a beauty in being able to listen to what other people have to be able to contribute. The art of following a conversation is extremely beneficial, not just because it makes everybody in the group feel comfortable to contribute, but it also means that the likelihood of you being able to learn something that you hadn't had or that you don't know and is not on your radar is simply higher. The more we can actively listen, the more we can take a step back and actively follow, whether it be a conversation or whether it be, like in my training example, my personal trainer, the likelihood of us learning something new about ourselves is very high. Therefore, I believe we have to first, step one, know and able to assess a situation, to know when we have to lead and when we have to follow. When does our involvement shift? What are the elements that are in the environment which require us to switch? I think in my training life, it's easy to know when I have to switch off and when I have to switch on. When I'm with Steve, I switch off. I listen very actively to his instruction and I focus purely on my muscles. I focus purely on my technique. I focus purely on the execution of his plan. I resist the temptation of asking him, what exercise comes next? What do we do? Why do we do this? I'm resisting that. That doesn't mean that I may not come back to it at a future point to ask him, okay, why was it structured this way? And that doesn't mean that I'm not coming back to it at a future state to get a better understanding. But in that moment, I essentially relinquish control and give that to a professional so that I can open up the opportunity to learn something new. Now, equally, as I mentioned, if I'm training by myself, then I take a much more active involvement because I know that I'm the person who needs to be able to do the structuring to get the best results. Might be similar if I bring it back to the conversational topic in a group. If you're in a group and people aren't contributing or they feel nervous, that might be an indication that you need to step in and lead by sharing your experiences or giving people the confidence to share theirs. Whatever way you look at it, there is a significant benefit that you can gain when you know when to do what, when the elements present themselves, how you should behave. Should you lead or should you follow? And I think the really important word, when you are following, I think it needs to be active. And when you are leading, I believe you need to be very aware of the people you're leading, because there may come a point when you are leading that you actually need to switch from leading to following. As you stimulate a discussion in a group, once the group starts to open up and talk, you may need to switch back into the following or the active following state to allow the conversation to grow. So I want to leave you with that thought. When should you be a leader and when should you actively follow? And what are the elements and how do you identify them and how do you respond to them? In my personal opinion, the main benefit that comes from this is that the likelihood of you learning something completely new and expanding your horizons, broadening your mind, will increase exponentially when you can master this. Once again, this is Luke from After the Final Set. If you found this helpful, please share it. As I mentioned, doing this to help people, and it's a pleasure for me to share these thoughts. Actually, it helps me to structure these thoughts in my head as well. So once again, thanks for joining me, and yeah, hope to see you around. Ciao.